March 22nd, 2023. Sam, roll call, please.
Bhatia,
Here. Here.
Driver,
Here.
Hewitt,
Here.
Rissler,
Here.
Van Beckham,
Here.
and Bozanovsky is excused.
All right. Next will be the approval of the February 22nd, 2023 meeting minutes.
Mr. President, Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the minutes from February 22nd, 2023 as submitted.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
I abstain. I wasn't here last.
I'm abstaining as well. I was not here. Still passes 4-2. Next on the agenda will be Resolution 4, 2023, 423 South Fancher Road, Comprehensive Plan Amendment, CPA 22-4. Sam.
Sorry, 1 second, just bringing it up. No person spoke in favor of or against the application. And also one of the things that we did per the Plan Commission discussion when this was up for preliminary review, so we extended the property distance down of where the lands that would switch over to residential commercial would be, essentially from where these are showing the total parcels. It's not the actual total parcels. It's the one at the top. That kind of long rectangle, that is 423 South Fancher, and that's the subject parcel. And then we took that rear property line and extended it all the way south to where the cemetery owns the land per our previous discussion. So we publicly noticed everyone within 300 feet, just to be safe. Typically, we don't have to do that for a comp plan amendment, but in this case, because there was that Plan Commission recommended change, we erred on the side of caution. So, this would extend that mixed residential commercial area down on the east side to allow for that per the previous discussions as well. And what we would advise applicants in the area for both this applicant and others is that we'd be looking for a neighborhood business style business here, not something with significant drive-throughs or late hours or anything like that, but something like service oriented that you might find adjacent to a residential area. The application, rest of the executive summary largely follows the same one from the previous month. It follows the following goals: promoting redevelopment and infill in areas with existing infrastructure and services, enhancing existing residential, commercial, and industrial areas, encourage development patterns that promote efficient, sustainable use of land that can be readily linked by transportation systems, and utilize existing public utilities and services. The proposed amendment would not lead to any detrimental environmental effects. We believe the proposed amendment is compatible with the surrounding land uses, particularly on the east side where it is completely surrounded by Vanguard Development's multifamily project that's planned for future phases, as well as extending that land use further south. A lot of those are old platted, from like the 40s and 50s deep lots that we would no longer subdivide them that way, so that should give, Vanguard owns a few of those parcels, and then there's a couple smaller parcel owners in there, so it should give them added flexibility. If they so choose, they can then list their property for commercial. Yeah, it's not in your packet. Sorry, this one didn't make your packet, if you're looking for it. We'll get you the resolution. The existing facilities can serve the type of development. The proposed amendment enhances economic development within the county, and the proposed amendment is in substantial agreement with the recommendations of the Regional Land Use Plan. So with that, we recommend that you move forward to approve Resolution 4, 2023, which is 423 South Fancher Road Comp Plan Amendment, CPA 22-4. And if you want to hold this one over a little bit just so you can see the formal resolution, we can have someone print it for you before you formally vote on it as well. I realize it didn't make your packet right before the meeting, so.
Personally, I think it'd be just good form just to have use the rest of the meeting to get the paperwork circulated, and we vote on it as the last item of business.
That's
real
totally fine.
quick.
Is that good?
That works.
That'll work. Good
Could you help me
suggestion.
out with that, Robin? Perfect, thank you. But in large part, this one didn't really change from last month. We didn't really hear much public comment either way. The only public comment that I did hear was people calling and asking the types of businesses that might go there, and we reiterated our point and the Plan Commission's point that neighborhood level business only, limited hours, limited outdoor use, that kind of thing. So no one had really any issue with that.
Okay, any other questions for?
Well, to that point, you mentioned the fact that, how do we regulate those businesses? Because obviously, a lot of things become right, based on what we rezone it. So, that's the key here for us to be able to say, how do we limit those? And
Yeah, I think our B1 and B2 zoning districts pretty well encompass that intent. So we'll just be noted on the staff side to be pretty aggressive in telling potential applicants that like a B3 or a B4 use, while it is adjacent to a county trunk highway, is also adjacent to a lot more residential uses here, and that we would not, and the Plan Commission, I assume, would not be willing to consider that intensive a use in that area. Maybe if it were at the corners of Spring and H, or a 20 and H or something, that might be different, but that's not the case here. This being kind of a mid-block area, I think that B2 is where we would recommend someone maxes out. And the most intensive uses in B2, like a gas station, have conditional uses tied to them that severely limit the size of those types of amenities to the point where I don't think anyone in a modern environment would even come to put those businesses there. So the most intensive use I could see that would be allowed via conditional use in this area would be a gas station, and we limit it to 4 pumps. So in this day and age, that's to consider, the old-timey neighborhood gas station, but I think the market just doesn't build those anymore. So we have pretty strict standards to limit those uses.
the B2 would allow a drive-through with double lanes, though, correct?
Only via conditional use, and it only allows a drive-through via conditional use, and it would limit it to a single drive-through.
Okay.
So they could not do a double drive-through, which would probably limit most fast food restaurants and things like that. The only places that I see with single drive-throughs are like small bank branches now, and people trying to have like pretty small office presence, maybe like a dry cleaner pickup station or something like that, where we wouldn't expect a lot of stacking or crazy peak hour use like you would at a fast food restaurant.
Okay, thank you.
What exactly is the amendment from the last time?
The amendment is from residential only to mixed residential commercial.
Okay.
Anyone looking to put commercial in this area would be allowed to apply for it if you approve the amendment, but it would be no guarantee that you would recommend approval of their zoning application. So you still have that zoning consideration, both you and the village board, if someone were to move forward with that.
Thank you.
We're going to be voting on this in a little bit, but is there any public comment on this? No? Okay. All right, then I think we'll move on.
Okay.
Next on the agenda would be 2745 Chicory Road Certified Survey Map, CSM 23-4.
The applicant applied to divide the parcels into 2 lots. Lot 1 contains 0.75 acres, which will contain a planned sanitary sewer project for the city of Racine and the village. And Lot 2 contains the remaining acreage, which will remain as is. The application follows the land use element of the comp plan. The village master bicycle plan identifies a planned bicycle facility along this stretch of Chicory Road, which already contains the appropriate right-of-way for that future improvement. And a park and open space plan for the village of Mount Pleasant does not propose any protection for this area. It complies with all the CSM regulations and ordinances. The property is currently zoned M2, which allows minor utility and public service uses by right. And the village estimates its portion of the project cost for this and the related sewer relay will cost $12,750,000. The city of Racine plans to take out a clean water fund loan for a term of 20 years, for which the village will pay its annual proportionate share of costs. The village staff do not recommend any conditions for approval, and the village staff recommends the planning commission moves to recommend approval of the application. So they're really just cutting off the corner there. They're going to put an underground tank in for sanitary sewer storage before it makes its way down. This is an area of the village that has been impacted by some basement backups and things like that. So this is the village and the city trying to address that in a larger infrastructure project. So yeah, they're just going to lay some tanks under the area.
Okay. Tom?
I've got a question in terms of the owner and the city and the village. I mean, the owner right now is KJJ Real Estate as we speak.
Correct.
So the city and the village are not going to be building this sewer facility on private land. Is there some contract in place or a purchase agreement whereby ownership goes from this private entity to the village?
I don't know the ownership structure, honestly, Tom. Was mostly handled through the Utilities Commission. We're just approving the land split here.
With the understanding that the village and the city are going to acquire it or going to build this sewer facility on it.
It'll either be leased or acquired. I'm not sure the answer to your question, so I don't want to speculate. Either way, the property owner would have to sign off on the CSM and gave us permission to apply. So regardless of how it shakes out, like everyone's on the same page from the CSM process.
Are those tanks, is the area above buildable, or is it left as?
No, it'd be left basically as is.
Any questions of Sam? If not, go ahead.
Chairman, I make a motion to Plan Commission to recommend approval of 2745 Chicory Road Certified Survey Maps CSM 23-4 to the Village Board.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next will be 6031 Regency West Drive Site Plan Review, SP 23-6.
The applicant applied to demolish the existing bank and build an 802 square foot 7-brew coffee restaurant and drive-through establishment. The establishment includes a double drive-through and a walk-up window for pedestrian service. The application complies with the comprehensive plan. The village does not have an adopted plan for local planning area 16. Neither the Parks and Open Space Plan nor the master bike plan identify any improvements for the parcel. The application complies with all the B3 district standards, including lot, principal building siting, principal building size, accessory building siting, maximum building height regulations. The B3 district permits food and drive-in or drive-through establishments by right. The village permits both the cooler building and the trash enclosure as accessory structures allowed in coordination with the primary structure and use. The property has existing access to sewer and water service. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation plans to install sidewalks along South Green Bay Road during an upcoming project. Therefore, the applicant shall coordinate with WISDOT regarding the sidewalk design so that the applicant's sidewalk installation ties into the Wisconsin Department of Transportation sidewalk design. And that is our first condition. Of all these conditions, the applicant has seen them and has responded to them, so they are already coordinating with WISDOT on that design. But we want to leave it on there as a condition just because some of that WISDOT coordination can take a little bit of a long time, so we didn't want it to drop off the application.
Does that delay their application in any way?
No. It might, they may need to coordinate on the engineering side, just on the final placement of some of the Regency West Drive sidewalk, how that ties in, but the DOT should be handling the corner crossing of that street, so it'll just be kind of where the junction of the stones lie in the sidewalk. It's pretty minor. Also, there is some connection to the the 31 sidewalk on the site plan, so they'll just have to coordinate there as well. So there's some public sidewalk coordination that they'll be doing and some internal pedestrian circulation coordination that they'll be doing. And as soon as the DOT gives them a location, they can just lie those stones there. Worst case scenario, they can use their best guess. I mean, we know where the right of way is, and the DOT has some preliminary plans. So, if the DOT needs to, reconfigure half a sidewalk stone or something like that, it's not the end of the world. The applicant shall petition the Wisconsin Department of Transportation to add 5 seconds of additional green time to Regency West Drive during midday hours. The traffic impact analysis prepared by Traffic Analysis and Design recommended the change. The applicant has already reached out to DOT to request that change as well. The applicant shall provide the village staff proof of a shared parking and cross-access easement along the southern private drive. Otherwise, the applicant shall amend the lighting plan to reduce the maximum light levels at the south lot line to no greater than 2.0 foot candles. If you look at the site plan, there's like a small stretch of both parking and landscaping as well as lighting that kind of goes across property lines. Typically, we try to draw that right at the property line. However, the applicants indicated they believe there's some sort of cross-access easement because this really pulls all of its access off of a private internal drive that's not a public street. So we just asked for proof that that is in place. Otherwise, they'll either have to amend the property lines or scoot some of the improvements off of the secondary property. So either way, we're fine with it. It all meets the standards. It's just making sure that they have permission to encroach upon a different property. A 10-foot water main easement along the east property line prohibits both trees and permanent structures within the easement. Therefore, the applicant applied for alternative compliance to place a dense hedgerow of wintergreen boxwood plants as a substitute to a masonry wall. Per section 90-430.100 alternative compliance, the community development director determined that this area of the subject site has utilities, so strict compliance is impossible and practical and no value in terms of advancing the general purposes of this division. Long story short, instead of a 3-foot masonry wall, which they normally need for vehicular use area screening, they proposed, because they can't put it there due to the easement, just some hedgerow instead, which they can put in that easement, as long as it's meeting the same height standards. We don't have any issue with that. It's probably as good of a one-to-one replacement as you're going to get with that easement limitation. So I said that was fine. The applicant did not propose any fences or walls. The application complies with the intersection visibility, signs, performance standards, nonconformities, bluff and ravine setbacks, flood protection, and shoreline protection sections. This is subject to site plan review and the definitions of Article 600. For fiscal impact, the application does not lie within a tax incremental district, nor did the applicant request any tax incremental financing. The current assessment value for the property is $1,017,600. The village assessor stated that he believes the new application will have a similar assessed value to the new Scooters Coffee on Washington Avenue at around $1 million. This value equates to approximately $1.55 million per acre. With 230 feet of local frontage, 10.9% of the village taxes collected over 20 years must go to repaving, which is greater than the 8.3 average the village dedicates to its annual paving program, indicating the development would not cover its approximate share of public infrastructure. The property would have to have an assessed value of approximately $1.35 million for it to cover its fair share of paving costs. However, there is some value to the redevelopment of a site currently vacant, and the value per acre is well above the $1 million per acre minimum target the village sets. Additionally, the adjacent commercial site southwards has additional buildings which utilize the same public roadway entrance that the village staff did not take into account, and the county maintains State Trunk Highway 31 using state funding. Because this site is mostly served via private driveways and entrances, this site kind of bears the brunt of our fiscal analysis, but there are a significant number of commercial properties and commercial parking lots that could be redeveloped further to the south in front of like Best Buy and Barnes & Noble and stuff there. And so both myself and the assessor, and I believe Robin, have specifically talked to those landowners who own that commercial area, saying it could be redeveloped in the future. So this is pretty close to meeting its obligations, and there's a bunch of land to the south that could, any redevelopment of which could support that public infrastructure burden. So that's why we are comfortable moving this forward without recommending any other changes to the site plan. Additional staff considerations, the south parking and landscape areas extend beyond the property line, as I already said. So we're asking for that proof of shared parking and cross-access easement. Otherwise, they'll have to amend the site plan to contain all the site features within the property. With that, we have 4 conditions for approval, and the village staff recommends the plan commission moves to approve the application. As a final call out, I'd like to thank the applicant. We had like 11 conditions on our first staff review. They took care of them right away. So it's nice to work with an applicant that has an engineer who's on it and makes the changes right away. And there were things regarding site lighting and making sure that some fixtures were fully enclosed for cutoffs and some of our lighting regulations there, and all of it was taken care of pretty quickly. Similarly, with pedestrian circulation internal to the site and bike racks and things like that, they made some pretty quick changes that meet all the ordinances for a stained concrete crossing and all of the drive aisles and things like that. So kudos to the applicant. We appreciate when someone works with us that quickly, and we can present to you a fairly clean application to approve.
Good, thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Sam, has any consideration been taken to look at adding a right turn lane onto southbound 31 out of that intersection? I know you're recommending that they get an extra 5 seconds of light time, but that is from my experience going through that area, it's always a bottleneck trying to get across and or turning left, and everybody's in the way. So is there any thoughts on it, especially since 31 is going to be, rebuilt in 26 probably?
Yeah, not as part of this application. They did do a full traffic impact analysis that said that this redevelopment by itself wouldn't require that addition of the lane, but I can certainly pass that note along. I'll take a second look at the DOT's draft plans and see if that's already included in it or if they have any other intersection improvements for that area. If not, I'll pass along the note to the DOT for you.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sam, I just failed to understand why this procuring a copy of the parking and cross-access easement has been taken care of. I agree, it's almost 99.9% certain there's such an easement to the south. It's easily obtainable by a title company or down by the county register of deeds. I expect that the current owner, the bank, has that document in their file, and I can't believe the new developer has gotten to this point.
I think the applicants are here, so why don't you ask that question to them? I don't want to speak on their title process. It wasn't provided to me, so that's all. I put the note in the thing and talked to their engineer, but sometimes through the ownership, some of that stuff can be in different hands. So if you're okay, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over.
Yes.
Okay.
Could we get your name and address?
Good afternoon. I'm Mark from Design to Construct. Address is N173W21010 Northwest Passage in Jackson. We are in the process of going through a number of documents, and normally I would agree with you, sir, but the bank that we're purchasing it from wasn't the original owner of the bank, and it went through a whole foreclosure process. We've got a mountain of documents. Many of them date back to 1992 and earlier, and we're just going through that. They actually got to the point where the offer was accepted only a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks ago on the property, so title data wasn't available to us right away. So we're just trying to make sure we go through every piece of paper that we have and make sure we understand where it is. There are current easements on the property, but they are in conflict with some of the other documents we have. So some of the documents say A, some of them say B, and we're just making sure that we're checking everything to make sure that it's in proper form.
Having been involved in some of these transactions, it just, again, strikes me that all this time, effort put into site plan, and I mean, you've put a lot of time and effort into it, and that's...
Well, to be perfectly frank, so when we look at the development's got a lot of history. It's been there for quite a while. And the property lines that are there are original property lines. The properties were developed with the lights where we're not putting lights in new places. They're going right back where they were. The curbs are in the exact same places they have been for the last 30 years. The drive aisles are in the same place they've been for the last 30 years. So when we went through the process of development of this, normally in a case like that, you've got something grandfathered in. It's an existing use. We're not changing how you access to our property. We're not changing how they're lit. We're not changing the curbs. We're leaving everything exactly like they are. So we made an assumption that that would be permitted as long as all the changes we made on our site were in compliance. Working with staff has a little bit different approach on that. They're a little more concerned about following exactly the requirements in the ordinance, which is perfectly fine. So when we got their comments back about 2 weeks ago, we then started to try to traverse through all the documents and make sure we understood what's going on in case we needed to make some changes. So that's how we got to this point. We were pretty much done with everything by the time the concern was brought to us, and we're just trying to address it now.
Okay, I would just ask, from my perspective, the more complete an application is when it comes to us, regardless of the topic, is always best. And so again, I'm thinking it's in that file that you've talked about somewhere. So as you're going through it, if you come across it, the sooner you get it to Sam, that'd be nice to check it off.
Absolutely.
I'm
And-
expecting it's like you, it's in there. I think your assumption's reasonable, but let's just get this
Right.
open-ended thing done.
Okay, it's on the top of our list.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Any other questions of Mark?
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't have a question, but I like to make a comment that I'm glad that you're coming here because that area, that bank has been closed for a long time and the lot has been. So I think based on your plan and your proposal, it seemed to me a great use of that vacant commercial space.
Thank you.
Thank you for considering Mount Pleasant.
Okay. If there's no other questions, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Looking for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the 6031 Regency West Drive site plan review SP-23-6, which is subject to the recommended conditions as noted by the staff.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Welcome to the village. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, next will be 3540 Northwestern Avenue Site Plan Review SP 23-7.
The applicant applied to demolish the existing beach house building and replace it with a new pavilion. This application is a resubmittal of a scaled-down plan originally approved as SP 0121, for which the previous site plan approval lapsed. Our site plan approval timeline is good for a year, which can be extended upon the Plan Commission's approval. Because this one substantially changed, they just chose to reapply under here. The county now plans to move forward to construct this phase of the scaled-down plan starting in the autumn. The application complies with the comprehensive plan. The village does not have an adopted plan for local planning area 8. Parks and open space plan for the village of Mount Pleasant 2050 states Quarry Lake Park is a 42-acre park located in the northeastern portion of the village along State Trunk Highway 38, Northwestern Avenue, and the Root River. A 4-acre portion of the park is located in the city of Racine. The park includes swimming beach, sand volleyball court, bathhouse, fishing areas, picnic area, trail, restrooms, and the Karen A. Nelson Memorial Dog Park. The park also contains a 29-acre portion of a primary environmental corridor and a 23-acre portion of the Horlick Bluffs and Quarries geological area identified in the Regional Natural Areas Plan. The plan recommends that the county continue to provide and maintain facilities at Quarry Lake Park. The Village of Mount Pleasant Master Bicycle Plan 2030 does not identify any required improvements through the park. This application complies with the Chapter 100. This is zoned P1, so neighborhood scale public use. The use is allowed by right in the zoning district, and all of the site-based bulk standards apply. The applicant shall amend the lighting plan to eliminate any upward-oriented lighting per section 90-425.30E and 90-425.40F. We provided these comments to the applicant, and the architect got back to us and said they would eliminate the uplighting that was shown on the plans. The applicant shall amend the lighting plan to provide a minimum of 0.5-foot candle of illumination in any renovated parking areas, including the parking surface and drive aisles. I included this just as a catch-all because there was some pavement replacement out there. Since I had a conversation with the applicant, and they do not anticipate that any of that pavement replacement would take place in parking areas or drive aisles. So you can actually strike condition number 2 from your comments. The application complies with the rest of the divisions. The property does lie within a shoreline zoning area. However, the property does not lie within 75 feet of any navigable stream or waterway. Quarry Lake Park is run and founded by Racine County, and the property is tax exempt. The village staff requests that Racine County merges the two properties contained within Quarry Lake Park together to create one single park parcel. It's never going to be able to be fully one parcel because a portion of it's in the city and portions of it is in the village currently. But right now, kind of the lake park of Quarry Lake is one parcel, and then the beach house is a separate parcel, but under contiguous ownership. It's just easier for us on the GIS side if the county merges the two parcels together. So that was a condition on the last application when it went through last year. And we want to make sure that didn't get lost as they finalized their revised plans this year. Because they run the Register of Deeds, we figure it's no easier party to merge the parcels together than the county. Finally, with that, the village staff recommends the Plan Commission moves to approve the site plan subject to the recommended conditions. Those would be, again, 1 and 3, with us being comfortable if you strike 2.
All right. Questions, Tom?
I'm a little puzzled by this create one single parcel. Right now, there's 2 legally defined separate lots.
Correct.
And are you proposing that the lots, they no longer be 2 separate lots?
Correct.
And so you'd have one lot that would straddle the village line with the city?
No. Just the village side has 2 separate parcels now. So there's a third in the city of Racine, which we can't control because the municipal boundary is a hard line. Just the 2 on the Mount Pleasant side, we would like them to merge together.
Okay, that makes sense, thanks.
And we've asked similar things of some adjacent properties around there. We've actually gotten both the county country club as well as Meadowbrook to merge all their parcels together, which were kind of scattered throughout that river corridor as they expanded over time. So if Quarry Lake Park is cleaned up, that's probably a few hundred acres of land over there that used to be like 16 or 20 different parcels that is now just merged under 3 contiguous owners, which is nice for us when we're doing analyses and things like that. It helps us understand who's owning what and why it's tax exempt and all of that.
But I think I heard you say that you've asked the city to do this a year or so ago.
The county?
The county.
Yeah.
Are they going to do it? Or are they just dragging their feet? Or they say no? Or
I think it was tied to, I don't want to speak for them too much, but my guess is it was tied to the actual project moving forward. And because the project, due to budgetary concerns, got put on the back burner and then was revised this year, our assumption is that it was just tied up in that process and they never move forward with it. So.
but they now are telling you they will take care of it.
I haven't had a conversation with them about the parcel merge. I mean,
Okay.
it seems to make sense and I can't see any downsides. So
And it's a condition.
it is a condition. It likely just, my guess is it stems from the original quarry ownership over time as it transferred into a public park. And it's just, sometimes things just never get cleaned up. So we like to take the opportunity to catch it when we do.
Any other questions for Sam? Mr. Rudy, would you like to add anything? No, you do not. Okay, if you're comfortable with what's going on.
I just have one final question. Just, when I was a kid, I used to go swimming there. I don't know that anybody swims in that lake anymore. Is the fact...
Quarry.
Quarry. Is it does the fact that we're going from having a beach house where people could change their clothes and go swimming to a pavilion suggest to me that is the county giving up on the hope of people swimming there? Or is this, or am I reading too much into the change in the building?
People did swim there. I don't know what the average, the amount of people that were there at a given weekend day, but
It is a lot. I drive by there regularly.
Okay,
And
all right, good.
the county has done a fair amount of work to
It's a
to
county
purify
park.
the water.
Yeah, it's a
So
county park.
it is very swimmable on a
All right,
regular
great.
basis.
Not just scuba divers.
Okay, good.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sam, your condition number 3 is actually not a condition, and I want to understand if, because say the village staff requests that the Racine County merge the 2 properties, so that's a request to the Racine County. So if they don't honor the request, then it's still a go kind of thing, right? So,
Yeah, it's still a go. I worded it a little bit softer than I normally would on a private property owner because them being another governmental entity. I wanted to be a little bit courteous in case there was some sort of long-standing title issue of why they couldn't merge them together. So I didn't want to make sure that if they could do it, they would. But if they couldn't do it for whatever reason, that this wouldn't hold up the rest of their approvals.
okay, I mean, it was obvious, but I just wanted to have clarification because it should not be, if they don't honor the request, then it should not be held against the applicant.
No, they would still be able to move forward with the beach house project.
No, otherwise it looks good. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move that the Plan Commission approve the 3540 Northwestern Avenue Site Plan Review SP 23-7, subject to the recommended conditions.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck. And ladies. Next on the agenda will be the village turf management policy. No, should we go to,
It's up to you. I can take it. Either one.
can you take this one?
Yeah.
The turf? Then let's do it.
Yep. Sorry, George was going to come today. He's feeling a little bit under the weather, so I tried to be a bossy person and tell him to stay home and feel better. So he was fully willing to come, and that was me telling him he needs to cool it and feel better. But the purpose of this has been through Public Works Committee as well. So, Frank can also buttress any questions that you might have from the committee side. But the purpose of this is just to define the turf management procedures in village parks and other properties maintained by Public Works. I think Trustee Hewitt has also known that we've kind of received some complaints, and we've tried to work on our turf management policy and where we're mowing and where we're not. Some of the things that George probably hasn't mentioned before at Plan Commission, but we have a certain number of parks that directly abut other residential properties, and we get a variety of opinions. Some people want everything to stay natural, the no mow May crowd, and then we have other people who want everything to look like a putting green, and so we're just trying to find a logical middle
It's not a turf war.
turf war. Yeah, we're trying to find a logical middle here that makes sense based on the usage of the parks and what the land is intended to be kind of there for. So what this policy does is categorize areas into three separate classes. That would be A areas, that would be 15% or less tolerance for weeds. So things like athletic fields, player safety. So those have a finish mower thing. Then B areas would be other, 16 to 30% tolerance for weeds. That's other recreation areas, including, where turf quality and appearance is important but not critical. So potentially a wide area mower. These could just be unprogrammed areas in some of our parks adjacent to residential neighborhoods and things like that. And then category C areas where they are expected to be more natural or native. So prairies, woodlands, wetlands, things like that. As you go through the procedures, it talks about integrated pest management, which is what we're aiming towards in terms of a policy to follow. We're not saying that we will 100% follow it every time, but that is kind of the overarching goal of how we're trying to approach turf management in the village. A lot of that is doing things like giving preference to non-chemical means of trimming or controlling weeds, placing mulch rings around trees after 2 years to lessen the need for string trimming and herbicide use, proper mowing and fertilization techniques, reducing the number of areas that have received occasional herbicide application, and exploring, testing, and implementing alternative methods of turf management, particularly methods designed to reduce the use of herbicides, among other things. So this is really us trying to use mechanical means when necessary and reduce the amount of chemicals that we're spraying out. Obviously, there's increasing research on the harm that some of those herbicides can provide to the natural environment, particularly when when we're taking grants to like restore the rusty patch bumblebee and things like that. So we want to be particularly careful and build upon some of the successes that we've seen in like the Pike River Corridor and the Smolenski Park Prairie and things like that, while still understanding that there could be circumstances where they are necessary for spot treatment, particularly on places like athletic fields where player safety is really important. The turf management categories, you can see there's a whole section on how we go through pesticide and herbicide application, as well as fertilizer application, when we use them, when we don't. Obviously, some of those things can also have specific runoff concerns when they're adjacent to natural areas or not, so we want to be mindful of that. Also, seasonal application too, making sure that we're not applying out of season and when it would be most beneficial and most cost effective for the village. And then finally, hard surface areas, saying that we will treat hard surface areas in typically limited way, but making sure that they're not huge weeds popping up through the cracks at most of our parking areas and things like that. The final section to go through, you can see the categories listed by name in terms of how George went and separated them. So certain parks that have Category A facilities include the turf and athletic seed areas of Campus Park, the Lakeside Cop House, the Parks and Recreation Building, the Public Works Building, South Shore Fire Department, Village Hall. So these are areas with higher pedestrian traffic or athletic fields. Category B would be places like Droz, James Turek, Lake Park, that are kind of residential adjacent, but kind of semi-natural state, and have a lot of areas for kind of unprogrammed outdoor recreation space. And then Category C, that's the most natural areas, include places like Bikes Ramkey for now while it's undeveloped, the compost site, Cozy Acres Park, some of our greenways and stormwater passages, Lathrop Manor Subdivision Park, the Pike River Pathway, Smolenski Prairie area, and the native seeded planted areas of Campus Park. And then you can see George put in a couple of diagrams there for Smolenski Park. The active planned areas would all be, that one versus the B area versus the C area. And then Campus Park, same thing. He included a diagram to show which areas have natural seating versus athletic and turf seating. So with that, it's just us trying to kind of specifically identify areas. So if someone calls in and says, why is, I live next to Dirksey, like why are there so many weeds there? It gives us some ratios to go out and take a look at it. So if it is true that there are a lot of weeds, we can say, oh, this is over our threshold of where we identified the park. We need to do some sort of mitigation strategy. But if it is not, then we have an adopted policy to give back to that person and saying, hey, this is in a Class B area. So while there are some weeds, it's not, we don't maintain this specific area to the level that we would an athletic field. So hopefully that makes sense. It's just us trying to take it. Did I miss anything, Frank, from Public Works?
No, there was one change we had requested, and it appears to have been made, so I think Public Works would be good with this version.
Great.
I'm going to assume that this will be shared with volunteer groups, the master gardeners, so that they're in compliance with our plan.
Definitely. We'll make sure that all of our volunteering groups know where is and is not off limits from things like weeding and all that kind of stuff. Most of them are pretty well trained in what is a weed and what is not. So we have people help us with buckthorn in the Smolenski Park woods, for example. So most of them are pretty good. We'll make sure this is out there. And we'll also make sure it's on the website in areas where people can see so they know what type of park they live next to.
A few questions. I agree it's great to have a policy. Has this been vetted? We're going to be using outside contractors, right? Landscaping companies to do the work for most of these parks?
Some of it is a mixture. Public Works and outside contractors take care of different areas depending on the need. So generally our mowing contracts are through outside providers, but we do have some areas that we take care of depending on the use.
So has this been vetted or just run by any outside contractors or somebody else who can maybe give some input as to practicality or the cost impact of some of these changes?
I don't believe we ran it past any contractors per se, but we did base this off of multiple other communities' turf management policies. I believe large part this is based on Cottage Groves over in Dane County, but there was a couple other communities that George cross-referenced as well to create this.
I know what, oh, go ahead.
I don't want to speak for the Public Works Committee too much, but some of their concern was instead of integrated pest management being kind of, we will follow this to the T, they wanted it to be more of a goal for us to follow, just to make sure that from a liability standpoint, we weren't having someone going in and being like, there's 16% weeds in this area, like the village needs to get out here and, crop dust this field or something. So it's always an aspirational goal, but nature is tricky, so we'll do our best.
Well, that's one of my concerns is some of the language here and there, it talks in a rather sweeping mandated effort when I think what we really should be doing is agreeing to make reasonable efforts. Like under pesticide in page 2, when I get nervous when it says the village shall make every effort to do something. That could put an awfully high burden on somebody who says, no, you've not exhausted every possible effort before using pesticides. So that kind of language is pretty aggressive and someone could hold you to it. So I'm just kind of pointing out you might want to say something like reasonable efforts but not every effort. That one always worries me. The other concern I have is my sense is that a lot of these laudable goals come with a higher price tag. To do these sorts of practices is going to cost more than I think the good old days of just a broadcast spreader with chemicals, and you do it once in the spring, once in the fall, and you're done. Mm-hmm. Who's done the cost analysis to try to get a sense of how much more expensive maintenance will be with these new procedures? I don't think we did a strict cost benefit analysis, but in large part we weren't doing that type of application anyways, so there was always going to be somewhat of an increased cost. In a lot of circumstances, we just weren't maintaining a lot of these areas really other than mowing them semi-regularly at all. So this is part of George just trying to create a policy, and with the village board, kind of Public Works Committee, understanding that there should be some cost, but we've tried to minimize the number of areas where we are doing very extensive type of pest and weed management control to the minimum areas possible. So I would say it's just a standard maintenance thing, and we can take care of it, through the typical parks budget.
Sam, I think common sense also goes along with the intended use of each of the park areas, everything then too.
Yeah.
I do have a question in regards to the pesticide-free parks,
Mm-hmm.
or parks. Who is going to determine what those are, and is there somebody that's saying, hey, these are some of the neighborhood ones we want to do this with, or what? Because it's going to be very, what's the reason behind that? Is there a group of people that said, we don't want this neighborhood park to ever be sprayed because we run our dogs out there all the time, or what is this?
Yeah, it's a mixture of that, pet concerns, as well as general health concerns, or sometimes environmental concerns. You can see here we didn't identify any pesticide-free parks off the bat. So when we go through that process, that'll likely be something that we have additional conversations with you, as well as Public Works, to make sure that, as we implement this policy, and if we see it's working, or if it needs tweaks, that we feel like we can take that added responsibility of a pesticide-free park. I think in large part, George was thinking those areas in the short term would be places like the Pike River Pathway, where we're not doing any of that to begin with. So we'll probably start with our pure natural areas, and then move forward. If there's areas of other parks where we can start to incorporate some of those practices, we'll bring them back to you.
Well, I think that's something that you'd want to advertise as well, that if we do have some of those areas that's out there on the website, so people who have, are affected by those types of chemicals, that, hey, they know they can go over to some park or an area in a park and there's never any pesticides put down there.
Definitely.
Okay.
And some of our grant obligations also hold us to limiting those practices as well. Like I mentioned, this Malinsky Prairie stuff was specifically, part of it was specifically prairie restoration to try to attract and retain rusty patch bumblebee, which is an endangered species. So those areas, we wouldn't do that anyways, because it directly goes against the purpose of why we restored it.
Right.
Yep. Go ahead, Tom.
Question on your providing notice to interested parties if something forces a treatment rescheduling, then we have to call everybody and let them know. It talks about if inclement weather forces rescheduling, that one I understand, but other things could force rescheduling. I mean, personnel, mechanical breakdowns, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why you reschedule. I would think the village shouldn't, if you have to reschedule, you have to reschedule. You know, it shouldn't be only for that one reason. And then
Can you point to the page, Tom, that you're
Come on.
specifically reading?
under pesticide application, what page would that be at? Third page, number 2 under pesticide application, middle of the page.
Got it.
Just, again, I don't want you to get staff in a position where they're getting some, you know, if the machine breaks down and if they have to reschedule, what do we do? I mean, I think that should be addressed here. And I'm a little nervous about the language. If possible, the village staff shall accommodate user group practices. I mean, I understand that, but boy, that could be hard to do, to reschedule. I mean, you can only do what you can do in terms of availability.
Yeah, I think that's just us indicating that we would do that regardless out of common courtesy, particularly in the summer months where we have a lot of groups either scheduling events or renting spaces or things like that. So I think George wanted to kind of put our best foot forward and say we'll do our best, but it's not a guarantee that we will accommodate a user group.
And I also, in the next paragraph, under number 3, there's this language here and a couple of other places that almost says the village will never use pesticides unless they absolutely have to. No other alternatives are available. Boy, that's, for pest control to almost preclude yourself from using pesticides unless there's some dire emergency is an awfully high standard. Because when it comes to, for instance, grubs, they're everywhere. Grubs have to be treated a certain type of the year. Aeration, overseeding, some of the other things you mentioned as alternatives are not going to deal with grubs. As far as I know, there's only one treatment, and that's pesticides before you know you have a problem. If you wait till you have a problem, it's not effective. So often with pesticides, it's proactive treatment, not reactive treatment.
Yeah, we don't really do any pesticide treatment as it is now, so this isn't really like an added burden. Like I said before, this is part of George kind of scaling up the department and trying to make sure our areas are maintained and setting the policy. So yeah, we're starting from kind of base zero of these areas are really just mowed. I think we've done a couple mosquito control applications. Really, those have been typically private groups when they want to lease out like Smolenski Park in the summer. Sometimes they'll like fog the area for mosquitoes if they know it's going to be like a big corporate party or something, but it's pretty few and far between.
Yeah, I think as we
Glenn
wrap-
does bee removal too.
Bee
In
removal,
sandboxes.
there we go, yeah.
Yeah, I think with us ramping up our parks and the improvements we're making with George keeping an eye on these things, I'm pretty pleased with it.
I don't want to lose your points, though, Tom. I'll definitely have the village attorney take a final read-through before this makes its way to the village board, just on a final liability pass-through. If there's any language that he wants to harden or soften, I can certainly have him make sure that he's okay with it as well.
Certainly, just being reasonable and common sense is going to guide your action, but I don't want that common sense and discretion to be boxed in by too aggressive language here.
Yeah,
So,
totally understand.
okay, thanks.
Okay.
The last thing I have, and I can share this with you later, is just a couple of words that are missing under the general turf management practices and procedures. So if you, I don't know if you want to do that now.
I'll just grab them from you after
Yeah, that's fine.
the meeting. If they're all typos and they're not
It's
content
just 2
related.
words missing, that's all.
Oh, hit them to me. I'll take them
Okay,
down.
on number 2, the village shall calibrate all mowing equipment to avoid cutting the grass.
Got it.
And then in number 6, the contractor it should be post-application notifications.
Got it.
There's a post is missing.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Eagle eye. Yes.
Oh, I just have again comment that I'm a policy and procedure guy, so I'm always pleased to see a plan, procedure, that instead of, okay, various parks and the various buildings, how do you maintain them, instead of shooting it from the hips, it's always good to have a plan and procedure, and also in the long term, that becomes your a tool to increase your operational efficiencies. Like any other plan, any other document, it's always good to have it reviewed by the attorney. And guess what? We have attorney on the on the planning commission, and I'm so glad to hear Tom comment said that you don't have to go out and to have it reviewed by the attorney. So you get free
I believe we
advice.
also have one on the Public Works Committee
Yes,
as well.
exactly. So no, I mean, seriously, their comments are very appreciated and very appropriate, but I'm glad to see a plan.
Do we need any action on this?
No, if you're good with it, just a general motion to move on to the village board would be appropriate.
I think we're in agreement with that.
Great, sounds good.
Okay. All right. Then the last thing on the agenda is going back to the resolution for 2023, Fancher Road.
Chairman, this seemed like a good point for me to be excused.
You're excused.
Thank you.
Drive carefully.
Thank you.
So on the revisit to the Fancher Road,
Correct, yes. Do you have any final questions or anything based on the materials?
you want a few
Give us
minutes
2
to
minutes
look
to
at
read
them?
it.
Sure, if you want.
Yep.
I was saying if we don't like that policy, the turf policy, I heard it grows on you.
Oh, jeez.
That one's ripe for a lot of puns.
So many.
to figure out how big of a fingerprint this took.
Good. Everybody comfortable with reviewing the plan here?
I'll make an added note that, sorry this didn't make it in your packet. I'll make sure that the online packet that we post for the record with the agenda and everything does have this info in it. So if any residents want to go back and pull it, they can. So just want to make that clear that I'll make sure it's everywhere it should be.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I just have one quick question on the parking. The write-up talks about the zoning would allow a occupant capacity up to no more than 250 persons. Did staff count parking spaces here, and are you comfortable there'll be enough parking for, on-site parking for the types of
We just
events
took
they
their
want?
draft site plan as an exhibit. They'll need to apply for formal site plan approval to come back, so we'll double check it there. But yeah, I didn't do a specific one just because it was, the code requires a formal parking and access plan, and I didn't want to give that one too much credence in case it changes due to things. They'll have to, they have a long road ahead of them before I think they could pull permits on that type of venue. So they'll need to work out some engineering things with water access and as well as a parking and access plan, as well as potentially sprinkling the buildings and if they're providing kitchen space, going through that whole permitting process and design process. So, it's I wouldn't expect this one back up next month. Probably the next application you'll see in regards to the wedding venue that started this whole process would be a zoning change to allow for it, and then my expectation is they would come back later on for a site plan, but we'll see what they apply for.
Well, and I would assume that if they don't have the space for 250, you're going to limit it less than that.
Yeah, the classification for assembly in our zoning code is either 250 and under or 250 and over. So this is just specifically limiting it to 250 and under.
Yeah, that's a type 1 assembly use. The minimum spaces in their code are 1 parking spot per 6 seats in the venue and 1 short-term bicycle parking spot per 30 seats in the venue. So that would be the minimum they would have to hit to pass the site planning muster.
1 per 6?
So that's
1 per 6 seats, yep.
40? Would that work out to
Yeah, it's
40
only
some?
40 cars? That doesn't
Well,
seem...
with like a wedding venue, like, the whole bridal party shows up in their party bus and stuff like that. And,
But I don't. I show up with my wife.
Yeah.
So there's 2. I said the vast majority of people going to a wedding, I think, show up in 2s.
Yeah, again, that's a minimum. My expectation is for that type of venue, the market would drive them to provide more than that, but that's what we require as a minimum for it.
Well, because right now they can't park on Fancher, correct?
Correct, yep. So if they didn't, as long as they hit those standards, we would be good. But again, if someone's looking to lease their venue, they'll have to provide the number of parking spaces they think. So when we lowered those parking standards, that was an effort for the village to kind of let the market drive the appropriate number while still setting kind of a minimum. But yeah, you see a lot of municipalities getting out of the parking minimum game entirely and just letting the market drive it. Typically, they'll provide more than we would ever require.
I expect you'll converse with the applicant on parking needs and what they need to take into account.
Yeah, parking and access plan. I think the other point with that, depending on their parking lot layout, obviously wedding venues and other type of event venues like this typically have a fair amount of pedestrian traffic between buildings or across lots and things like that. So we'll keep a keen eye on how people are safely crossing some of those areas because, typically there's alcohol involved in some of these event venues and stuff as well if they get their licensing through the clerk's office for being able to serve that. So,
And the applicant is aware of the parking issue. I mean, we've discussed this with them before, correct?
Yes.
So it's not going to be a surprise to them,
No, I don't think so.
right?
I think there's like probably 4 or 5 more critical issues even before you get to parking. So we'll get to that, but I mean, there are quite, as Sam listed, so.
Building
this is a tough-
sprinkler is going to be a
This is tough,
pricey
yeah.
upgrade.
Yep. Okay. Now, if there's no other questions or public comment, then I'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Village of Mount Pleasant Plan Commission approve the proposed amendments and further recommends adoption of an ordinance by the Village Board amending the 2035 Village of Mount Pleasant Comprehensive Land Use Plan and the Multi-Jurisdictional Comprehensive Plan for Racine County 2035.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? None? And I'll call a question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Robin, you've been pretty quiet.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just kind of shook out that way. And so normally I would have probably done the comp plan amendment. But I did all those ones at the village board a couple weeks ago where we had like 10 items on the agenda. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. Is the clicker here or no clicker? Okay, no clicker. So these are just basically a list of our staff approved permits, just signed permits, and zoning compliance, wired communication, very standard stuff. Next slide. Municipal complaints, and with, oh wait, that's last month's. Move again. Wait, this is the wrong. That's the wrong one. Okay, so no, that's the right one. So okay, municipal complaints, and keep on going. Wait, this is the wrong. Basically the thing version. Sorry. I don't even know where some of the slides came from. I thought I deleted them all.
Go for an update next month.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so there's municipal complaints. Just basically a couple of, mostly a lot of actually DPW complaints about drainage and whatnot, that considering what we've been having recently. I do kind of want to go into one particular one because we had a rather fun election sign complaint, which I think is just interesting. So next slide. So we got a sign complaint on this corner. This is the corner of Racine and Green Bay Road, 31. There was an 8x4 election sign right there as marked on the screen. And it was in the vision triangle of this roadway. So a vision triangle 20 feet back from the corner and to the side, and you complete a triangle. Nothing can be over 2.5 feet high there. This sign was actually 3.5 feet. But what the interesting thing is, so this property is in Mount Pleasant. This property owner has a corner of their lot that's in the city of Racine. And where that sign is in the actual right-of-way for the city of Racine. And though this is State Highway 31, so the actual maintenance people are the county. So luckily, I just basically talked to the property owner, and they say they did not place that sign there. And I believe that the sign was placed there because of this sort of odd property arrangement that it's like a little bit of a no man's land. They did not place it there, so they removed it. And then as a courtesy, I contacted the candidate whose sign it was, informed them it was removed and for them to pick it up at their leisure. And they thanked us and went and picked up the sign. So just a little gander and those things that happen all the time. So The other things about the sign was the size and stuff was all legal, but it has to be on a property, can't be in the right of way, and it can't block a vision triangle. This is a particularly dangerous intersection too. I'm pretty sure everybody's aware. Trying to even make a right turn onto Green Bay at this road is pretty sketchy. So that's it for me. I guess sort of not listed, but Sam and I are going to the National American Planning Conference here in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be in the City of Brotherly Love in Philadelphia. So we look forward to having reports from that for you next month.
Don't forget to ring the bell.
Run the steps.
Oh, I only lick the Liberty Bell.
Run up the steps.
Robin, on the, for future, for the sign permits, I know you said this is kind of like a cut and paste thing.
Yeah,
Can we know who the signs are?
yeah, I
Or
can
is
put
that
that.
too much work?
I can put that on there. A lot of times when the applicants put in, so it's the name of the applicant, so it's either the person who's responsible for the sign, or it's the name of the company, like Fast Signs or Michaels or whatever. So I sometimes have to do a little bit of digging, but I can certainly do that.
It's not a lot of work. That would be helpful, just,
Wow.
you know, if it says Seven Brew or.
Yeah, and there's only like 4 or 5 a month, so it's not that big a deal.
Okay.
So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. And have fun in Philadelphia.
Behave yourselves.
Well, I didn't say that. One more motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, commissioners and staff.